Excuse me, I speak Mandarin. Fire him. Right now, the Billionaire CEO shouted, slamming his palm on the polished glass table so hard the water glasses trembled. Everyone froze. In the towering 40th floor boardroom, where the walls were made of glass and pride, silence wrapped itself around the room like a noose. 10 Chinese delegates sat in confusion. They whispered in Mandarin, their faces tight with discomfort. The translator was gone. Vanished. And the billion-dollar deal, 3 years in the making, was slipping through shaking fingers. That's when it happened. From the back corner of the room, near the trash can, a soft voice said, "Excuse me. I speak Mandarin." Heads turned. Eyes widened. The voice came from Darnell, the janitor. A tall, quiet black man in his mid-30s, wearing a faded navy blue uniform and holding a mop. His hands were rough from years of work, but his eyes held something most in the room didn't, calm confidence. The CEO blinked. "What did you say?" "I said," Darnell stepped forward, "I speak Mandarin. I can help." The room erupted. Some laughed. Some gasped. One executive whispered, "Is this a joke?" But Darnell didn't flinch. Instead, he looked straight at the CEO and said in perfect Mandarin, "I understand your frustration. Please allow me to help salvage this deal." The lead Chinese delegate, Mr. Li, sat up straighter. He smiled. "Finally, someone understands us." That moment changed everything. You might be thinking, how did a janitor end up speaking perfect Mandarin in the middle of a billion-dollar meeting? But what if I told you this wasn't luck? This was fate. And what happens next? It'll break your heart and put it back together again. Because this isn't just a story about a language. It's about being seen, being doubted, and rising anyway. Stick with me because the twist, it's coming. Comment below if you've ever felt overlooked. Like this if you believe talent can come from anywhere. Subscribe for more stories that inspire, shock, and change the way you see the world. No one ever asked Darnell where he came from. Not once in the 5 years he worked the night shift. He was the guy who emptied trash cans, mopped floors, and changed light bulbs without being seen. Just a name on a staff tag. Just background noise in a world of suits, secrets, and stock prices. But if someone had looked closer, they would have seen the worn-out Mandarin textbook he kept in his locker. Or the way he paused outside the boardroom when meetings were in Chinese. Listening, learning, absorbing. Darnell didn't just speak Mandarin. He understood it. Deeply. Because long before he held a mop, Darnell was a linguistics student, top of his class. Until everything fell apart. A car crash took both his parents. With no family left and no money to finish school, he dropped out. The only job he could get was cleaning the very building where he once dreamed of becoming an interpreter. He told himself he'd only do it for a few months. 5 years passed, but he never stopped learning. Late at night, while scrubbing floors, he'd play Mandarin audiobooks through cheap headphones. He memorized phrases, watched Chinese business news, practiced pronunciation with the vending machine as his audience. He didn't have an audience of investors. He had a mop, a bucket, and a purpose no one knew about. Until today. Until fate put him in the right room, at the right moment. When the right people were too blind to see him. Until they had to. The CEO, Mr. Carter, was still in disbelief. He turned to his assistant. "Is this man on payroll?" The assistant nodded dumbly. "He's a janitorial." Mr. Carter stared at Darnell. "You really speak Mandarin?" Instead of answering, Darnell turned to the Chinese delegates and asked, "Would you like to continue the meeting in your language?" Mr. Li, the lead delegate, smiled wide. "Yes, please. Let's continue." Suddenly, the mood in the room shifted. Tension began to melt. Smiles returned. The conversation restarted, smooth, respectful, full of life. Darnell stood at the head of the table, translating like he was born for it. He wasn't just relaying words. He was catching tone, culture, meaning. Every delegate in that room looked at him like he was magic. But no one, not one person, had ever looked at him that way before. The air in the boardroom had changed. What was once cold and sterile now hummed with attention. Not toward the CEO, not the million-dollar suits, but toward the janitor who had become the voice of the room. Darnell stood tall, no longer holding a mop, but the entire meeting in the palm of his hands. For the first time in years, he was seen. The Chinese delegates leaned in when he spoke. He translated jokes with just the right rhythm, cultural references with grace, and serious concerns with perfect clarity. He didn't stumble. He didn't pause. He was flawless. One of the younger Chinese executives even clapped softly at one point. "He understands our language better than our last translator," he said in Mandarin, smiling at Darnell. Mr. Lee, the lead delegate, nodded. "He understands our hearts too." Darnell gave a small, humble nod. Inside, he was shaking. But outside, he was calm, collected, like a man who had nothing to lose and everything to prove. Across the table, CEO Mr. Carter watched in silence. His jaw was tight, eyes sharp. He wasn't sure whether to feel grateful or threatened. And he wasn't the only one. Behind him, Richard, the senior VP who had once called Darnell just the janitor, leaned toward Carter and whispered, "This can't be good for optics. Makes us look like fools." Carter didn't respond. But he remembered. He remembered the countless times he walked past Darnell in the lobby, never saying a word. He remembered the nights he stayed late, and Darnell quietly emptied his trash while he barked orders into his phone. He remembered last Christmas, when he handed Darnell a $5 gift card and said, "Thanks for keeping the place clean." Now that same man was saving his deal. A deal that had been falling apart for months. A deal his entire company had invested time, resources, and reputation into. And the only person holding it together wore a name tag that read Facilities Staff. As the meeting continued, the CEO's respect for Darnell grew, but so did his discomfort. The room was no longer orbiting around him. It was orbiting around Darnell. And Darnell? He was in his element. With every sentence he translated, every cultural nuance he explained, he was stepping back into the man he used to be. The student, the speaker, the son of two hard-working parents who once told him, "Your voice is your gift. Don't let the world silence it." He hadn't let the world silence it. He had just spoken quietly. Until now. By the end of the meeting, the tension had dissolved into firm handshakes and cheerful bows. The Chinese delegation stood, smiling, and Mr. Lee turned to Mr. Carter. "You almost lost us," he said through Darnell's translation. "But this man, he brought us back." Then, switching to English, he said directly to Darnell, "You saved the day." Carter forced a smile. Yes, he did. Darnell nodded politely and stepped back. But as he turned to return to his cleaning cart, Mr. Carter spoke up. "Wait." The room paused. Carter stood, straightened his suit, and walked over to Darnell. "You're not going back to cleaning floors," he said, voice louder than it needed to be. "Not after this." Darnell looked him in the eye. "Sir, you just saved $1 billion deal. We need people like you in the room, not cleaning it." The boardroom erupted in claps. Some executives smiled, others nodded in respect. Even Richard managed a weak clap, though his face looked like he'd just swallowed vinegar. But Darnell didn't smile. Not yet. Because in his mind, he had questions. Why did it take a crisis for them to see him? Why did he have to save their pride before they acknowledged his purpose? Why did a mop define him more than his mind? As the room cleared, Darnell stayed behind to gather his cart. Mr. Lee walked over one last time. "If your company doesn't value you, our doors are open. China could use a man like you." Darnell smiled. "Thank you. That means more than you know." As the elevator doors closed behind the delegates, Carter turned to Darnell. "You never said you could speak Mandarin." "You never asked," Darnell replied. Carter nodded slowly. "Well, I'm asking now. Will you stay, with a new title, new role, new salary?" Darnell paused. "I'll think about it," he said, and pushed his cart out of the boardroom. A name, not a number. He walked through the marble halls like he always had, but this time they watched him. Security nodded with respect, and in turn smiled awkwardly. Even the receptionist, who used to barely glance up, offered a cheerful "Good morning, Mr. Darnell." Mr. Darnell. Not the janitor. Not "Hey you." Not invisible. That should have felt good. But instead it felt strange. Respect earned under pressure always comes late. And Darnell had learned to live in the shadows so long, the light now felt too bright. He stepped into the break room. Empty. Quiet. Safe. He sat at the corner table, the same one where, for 5 years, no one joined him. He'd eat his sandwich, study his Mandarin book, and watch the clock like it owed him something. Today, though, he didn't pull out his textbook. He pulled out something older, something heavier. A small, worn photo of two smiling faces, his mom and dad. His mom was a schoolteacher. His dad was a mechanic. Both were black, proud, and full of belief in their only son. They'd given him everything they could. And when Darnell got into one of the top language programs in the state, they'd cried with pride. "I want to travel," he once told them. "I want to be the bridge between people who can't speak to each other." His dad had grinned. "You ain't just a bridge, son. You're the whole highway." But then the crash happened. A rainy night. A delivery truck ran a red light. Gone. Just like that. In one breath, he lost his parents, his support system, his direction. He dropped out of school, moved back to the city, and took the first job that said no experience required. And for 5 years, no one asked his name. He was a number, an ID badge, a uniform with a stain that wouldn't come out. But he kept studying, kept learning, kept believing in the boy his parents raised. Because deep inside, he knew one day someone would see him again. And that day had finally come. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Mr. Carter's office. "Come to the executive suite. 11 a.m. Bring nothing but your voice." He looked at the clock. 10:57. Darnell stood slowly. He put the photo back in his wallet, straightened his shirt, and walked upstairs. Not in the service elevator this time, but the front one. The one only the executives used. When the doors opened, he stepped into a world built on power and polish. Leather walls. Framed art. Coffee that didn't come from a vending machine. The assistant at the desk looked up, startled. "Can I help?" "Oh, Mr. Darnell, right this way." He was escorted into the same boardroom from yesterday. Only now there were no suits. Just Carter sitting alone, sipping coffee. "Close the door," the CEO said. Darnell did. Carter stood. "I've had over 24 calls this morning. The Chinese delegation was blown away. Said we've never made them feel more respected. Said your translations weren't just accurate, they were emotional." Darnell stayed quiet. Carter continued. "I want you on staff. Officially. Title, Director of Cross-Cultural Communications. Starting salary, $180,000. Company phone. Corner office. Full benefits." Darnell's chest tightened. That was 6 times his current salary. Carter smirked. "No mop required." Silence. Darnell looked him straight in the eye. "Why now?" "What do you mean? Why didn't anyone ask what I could do before yesterday?" Carter sighed. "Because this world's loud, Darnell. Loud and shallow. People are busy chasing voices they already know. They forget to listen for the quiet ones." "And what about people like me?" Darnell asked. "What happens to us while the world forgets?" Carter paused, then said something Darnell didn't expect. "We're the ones who make the world better, when it finally slows down enough to notice." Darnell accepted the job. But not for the money. Not for the corner office. Not for the suits that would now call him sir. He took it for the boy his mom once told. "Your name means strong. Don't ever forget that." He took it because he was no longer a number. He was Darnell Thomas, son of Evelyn and James. A man with a voice, a gift, and now a platform. Has the world ever made you feel like just a number? Darnell's journey reminds us, you don't need a title to have value. You just need courage to keep showing up. When the world listens. 3 weeks later, Darnell stood in a room he used to clean. Only now he let it. His name was etched in gold on the office door. Darnell Thomas, Director of Cross-Cultural Communications. The walls were still white, the city view still massive, but the energy around him had changed. People smiled when he passed. They listened when he spoke. They invited him to meetings not to mop up after, but to guide, to teach, to lead. Mr. Carter paraded him around in press releases and shareholder memos. A powerful story of hidden talent rising to the top. A company that sees everyone. Darnell became the face of change. A symbol of what was possible. And for the first time in years, he felt like he was living his calling. But not everyone was clapping. It started with small things. A spreadsheet missing from his inbox. A rescheduled meeting he was never told about. A department report that excluded his notes, even though he led the project. At first, he thought it was coincidence, until he walked into the staff kitchen one afternoon and overheard them, whispering. "He's just a janitor with a glow-up," one voice said. I give it 3 months. Carter will get bored. These stunts never last, another added. They didn't see him standing around the corner. They never imagined he could be close enough to hear. He walked back to his office, closed the door, and sat in silence. It stung more than he expected. Not because he wanted to be liked, but because after everything he'd proven, some people still couldn't see him as more. That same week, a crisis hit. A new potential deal with a Chinese tech firm had landed, bigger than the last. A game changer. Mr. Carter called an emergency meeting. Darnell, he said, you're going to lead communications. Full control. Darnell's heart thumped. Understood, sir. They flew the Chinese team in, hosted a private dinner. The entire board was counting on him to navigate the language, the culture, the nuance. And on the final day of the negotiation, Darnell entered the boardroom early to prepare, only to find someone already at the head of the table. Richard, the same VP who never liked him, the one who had whispered doubts from day one. Morning, Richard said flatly, not looking up. Just helping out. Carter asked me to sit in. That was a lie. Darnell knew it. But there was no time to argue. The Chinese delegates entered. Polite bows, handshakes, smiles. But something felt off. Mr. Lee wasn't among them. A younger representative, Ms. Fong, now led. She looked confused when she saw Richard begin speaking on behalf of the company. And Darnell? Darnell was seated off to the side like an assistant. He waited for a chance to speak. Waited for Richard to stumble. But Richard didn't. He had memorized phrases, watched YouTube videos, trained for this moment. But his tone was flat. His expressions were off. He misused a key proverb. The room's energy grew tense. Darnell cleared his throat. With respect, I believe what my colleague meant was. Richard cut him off. I've got this. But Ms. Feng's face had already tightened. She spoke quietly to her team in Mandarin. Darnell heard it all. This is not the same respect we were shown last time. Why is the translator now silent? Darnell's chest burned. He could fix this. He should fix this. But pride stood in his way, and it wasn't his. The meeting ended in discomfort. No deal. No celebration. Just awkward goodbyes and forced smiles. Back in his office, Darnell got a call. It was Mr. Carter. Furious. What happened in there? He demanded. Darnell paused. I wasn't allowed to speak. What do you mean? Ask Richard. There was silence. Then, meet me tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. No excuses. Darnell hung up and sat there, staring at his reflection in the window. This was it. The moment where they either trust him or drop him. He thought of quitting, of walking out with his dignity. But then, he remembered his father's voice. You don't stop in the middle of a storm. You stand taller. The next morning, Darnell entered Carter's office. Carter sat at his desk, eyes tired. I spoke to Ms. Fong last night. Darnell nodded. And she said she was ready to sign until we silenced the man she trusted. Carter leaned forward. She meant you. Silence. Then Carter stood. Richard's been let go. Darnell's eyes widened. What? You were right. Some people still see with their egos. But I see you now, Darnell. For who you are. It had been a month since Darnell saved his second major deal. A month since Richard got escorted out of the building. And now, when Darnell spoke, people didn't just listen. They took notes. Executives who once ignored him now scheduled meetings just to pick his brain. His inbox was full. His calendar packed. The company even featured his story in a national business magazine. From janitor to executive, the man who translated his way to the top. Everyone wanted a piece of Darnell Thomas. But success, as he quickly learned, came with a different kind of pressure. He couldn't walk through the office without someone asking for his help. Darnell, can you review this client email? Mr. Thomas, what do the Chinese value more, speed or formality? Hey D, can you join this call last minute? The same people who once didn't see him were now depending on him for everything. And he couldn't afford to mess up. Not once. Because one mistake, and someone would say, see, he was never ready. One rainy afternoon, Darnell finally took a break. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling window in his corner office, sipping black coffee, watching the raindrops race down the glass like they had somewhere more important to be. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something told him to pick up. Hello. There was a pause. Then a quiet, familiar voice. Darnell? He froze. Tasha. The voice grew stronger. I heard what happened. I saw the article. I had to see for myself. Tasha. His ex-fiancée. The woman he'd planned a life with, before everything fell apart. Before the car crash, before the debt, before he became just a janitor. She had left, not cruelly, but quietly. I can't do this anymore, she had said. You're not you anymore. He hadn't heard from her in almost 6 years. Where are you? He asked, still stunned. Downstairs, she said. He met her in the lobby. She looked just like he remembered. Braids, soft eyes, a nervous smile that used to calm him during exams. You look important, she said, half laughing, half serious. Darnell smiled. I guess I am now. They sat in the cafe across the street. She told him she'd moved to Atlanta, started teaching high school English. She'd followed his journey online, quietly from the background. I always knew you had it in you, she said. He raised an eyebrow. Then why'd you leave? Her smile faded. I didn't leave you, Darnell. I left the version of you that was drowning and refused to reach for help. You were so proud. You pushed everyone away. She wasn't wrong. Back then, he was angry at the world. Embarrassed. Broken. Back then, he was angry at the world. Embarrassed. Broken. He didn't let anyone in, not even her. I thought I'd be cleaning floors forever, he said softly. But you didn't stop, she replied. You kept learning. You kept believing in yourself, even when no one else did. Darnell looked out the window. No, he said. I almost gave up. Every single day. But I kept hearing my dad's voice. You're the highway, son. She reached across the table, gently touched his hand. I'm proud of you. And for the first time in years, he believed it. Not because of a magazine article. Not because of the salary or the office view. But because someone who once loved him still did. That night, back in his office, Darnell sat at his desk. Alone. The building was quiet now. Most had gone home. He opened a new file on his computer. Title: Language as Legacy, Internal Cultural Training Program Proposal. He was going to start something new. Not just for the executives or the clients, but for everyone. The janitors, the security guards, the cafeteria workers, the mailroom crew, the people like him. Because he knew better than anyone what it felt like to be brilliant and unseen. To speak perfect Mandarin with no one to hear you. To carry dreams in silence. And he was done letting that happen under his watch. The next morning, he pitched the idea to Carter. A company-wide cultural training program. Language classes. Leadership workshops. A mentorship system, designed for the overlooked. Carter listened. Then said, it's ambitious. But if anyone can lead it, it's you. Have you ever seen someone rise, only to be pulled back down by their past? Darnell teaches us. You don't truly succeed until you turn your success into someone else's breakthrough. The flyers went up on a Monday, printed in bold letters. Unlock your voice. New cultural training program begins this fall, led by Darnell Thomas. They were everywhere. In the elevators, on the cafeteria walls, in the break room, and on the lower levels, the floors nobody talked about, where the janitors clocked in, where the security guards took their midnight coffee breaks, where the people with no business cards worked like their lives depended on it. Because they usually did. Within a week, the sign-up list was full. People from every department joined. Not because they were required, but because they finally felt invited. Darnell stood in front of a small crowd on the first day of training. Some wore suits. Others wore overalls. A few still had cleaning gloves tucked in their back pockets. He smiled and began. Language is more than words. It's culture. It's confidence. It's power. He paused. Power too many of us were told we didn't deserve. Heads nodded. Eyes softened. I was once in your shoes. Not long ago. In fact, some of you knew me then, when I cleaned these halls and no one looked me in the eye. A murmur swept through the room. A few people smiled with recognition. But now I stand here not because I demanded a seat at the table, but because I earned it, and I'm here to help you do the same. That night, as he packed up his laptop, an intern named Mike lingered behind. He was young, maybe 22. Nervous energy, hoodie, messy notepad. Mr. Darnell? He asked. Just Darnell, he smiled. I wanted to say thank you. I signed up because I'm half Korean and I've always been scared to speak it here. People laughed at me once. Thought I was weird. Darnell looked him in the eye. You're not weird. You're a bridge. Just like I was. Don't stop crossing it. Mike smiled and walked out, shoulders a little higher. That was the win. Not headlines. Not bonuses. People believing in themselves again. But not all voices in the building were cheering. Some whispered in corners. In hushed phone calls. In meetings Darnell was not invited to. He's shaking up too much, someone said in the executive lounge. He's too loud about where he came from. It's uncomfortable, another muttered. He's making the janitors think they belong upstairs. It was subtle, like poison in tea. One afternoon, a message arrived in Darnell's inbox. Subject, confidential, reputation management. He opened it. Inside was an anonymous complaint claiming Darnell was dividing the company by elevating unqualified voices. Attached was a PDF, a file with screenshots, old ones, of Darnell, in his janitor uniform, sitting in a stairwell with a beat-up Mandarin textbook. Sleeping once during a late-night break. A coffee spill. The final image? A security cam still of Darnell alone in the boardroom. The night he stayed behind after saving the first deal. Captioned, unsupervised, unauthorized. It was a threat, not just to his job, to his name, to the man he fought to become. He stared at the email for a long time. Heart pounding, jaw clenched. He felt rage, but also something colder. Fear. Because no matter how far you climb, some people will still try to pull you back to the bottom. Still try to say, you don't belong here. He walked straight into Mr. Carter's office. I got a message, he said. Carter nodded slowly. I saw it too. Darnell waited. Then Carter surprised him. I traced it, he said. The file came from a company laptop. Belonged to Richard. Darnell blinked. Richard's gone. He came back, Carter said. Not officially. But he's consulting for one of our competitors. And he's angry. Very angry. Darnell sat down. This is about power, isn't it? Carter nodded. It always is. There was silence. Then Darnell said, calm and steady, if you want me to walk away quietly, I will. But if you still believe in what we're building. Carter interrupted. No one's walking away. Not you. Not this mission. I hired you for who you are, not just when it's easy. He paused. But this will get ugly. The higher you rise, the louder the attacks get. Darnell leaned back, staring at the city skyline. I didn't climb all this way to flinch now. Return of the storm. Richard resurfaces publicly, and the media starts to twist Darnell's past. But an unexpected ally comes forward, and the company must decide who they truly stand behind. Have you ever been judged for who you used to be, not who you are now? Darnell shows us. Sometimes the hardest part of success is holding on to it when others want it torn away. It started with a headline. Janitor turned executive, or just a PR stunt. Then another. Inside the rise of Darnell Thomas. A Cinderella story, or corporate cover-up? And just like that, the storm returned. Talk shows debated his qualifications. Anonymous blogs questioned his education. Social media twisted his story into something it was never meant to be. One viral post read, so we're handing six-figure jobs to janitors now? No degree, no experience? Just good PR. Darnell didn't flinch at first. But then came the lie that cut the deepest. Sources say Darnell was fired from a previous school for falsifying his transcript. It was completely false. But facts didn't matter. Perception was bleeding faster than truth could patch it. Inside the company, tension thickened. Some executives went quiet. Others started avoiding eye contact in the hallway. A few even stopped copying him on key emails. Carter called an emergency meeting. We need to get ahead of this, one board member said. Maybe a formal statement, some distance. Another added, he's talented, yes, but this attention is damaging. Investors are getting nervous. Darnell sat in the corner of the room. Like he used to. Quiet. Watching. But not invisible anymore. He finally stood. I didn't ask for headlines. I didn't ask to be the face of change. I just am change, because you refused to see it until I was standing in front of you holding $1 billion deal together. He looked them each in the eye. Don't distance yourself from me now that it's uncomfortable. I was the same man last week, and I'll be the same man tomorrow. Silence. Then Carter spoke. We stand with Darnell. But Darnell knew not everyone in that room did. That night, alone in his office, the pressure finally cracked. He closed the blinds, locked the door, sat in the dark. Doubt crept in like a whisper. Maybe I was just lucky. Maybe I don't belong here after all. Maybe they were right. But then a knock. He wiped his face quickly. Come in. The door opened slowly and in walked Mr. Li, from the Chinese delegation, the man whose respect had started it all. Mr. Thomas, he said warmly. I heard about the noise. I came to speak truth to it. Darnell stood stunned. You came here for me? Li nodded. You respected our language when no one else did. You listened when no one else cared to understand. Men like you bridge nations. He placed a folder on Darnell's desk. Inside were letters, signed testimonials from members of the Chinese Business Council, each one vouching for Darnell's skill, integrity, and cultural intelligence. Li smiled. Your story is not a scandal. It is an example. Let them twist lies. We will speak truth. The next day, Carter called a press conference. The room buzzed with cameras and tension. Carter stood at the podium. There has been a lot of noise about Darnell Thomas, he began. So let's speak clearly. He stepped aside, and Darnell stepped up. No script, just truth. I was a janitor. Yes. I mopped your floors, took out your trash, cleaned your bathrooms. But while I cleaned, I learned. I studied Mandarin in the break room, practiced speeches in empty halls. I earned my place, not by luck, but by resilience. He held up the folder from Mr. Li. These are letters from global leaders. Not because I asked for them, but because I earned their respect. I won't apologize for where I started. I'm proud of it. The crowd was silent, until one reporter stood up. A black woman in her 40s. Tears in her eyes. She said softly, "Thank you for not staying quiet." And the room applauded. Later that evening, back at his desk, Darnell received an email. Subject, you did it. From Tasha. She had watched it all from home. One line stood out. You turned every mop stroke into a stepping stone. I'm proud to know you. Darnell closed the laptop, walked to the window, and looked out over the city. He hadn't just survived the storm. He stood in it, and stayed standing. Has your voice ever been silenced by people afraid of your power? Darnell's message is clear. The world may doubt you, but you don't have to doubt yourself. It started quietly. An email here. A thank you note there. Then a whisper in the elevator from someone Darnell didn't even know. You gave me courage, man. I've been hiding my voice too long. And suddenly, a wave began to move through the building. It wasn't just about Darnell anymore. This was about everyone who'd ever been overlooked, talked over, or told to wait their turn. 2 weeks after the press conference, Carter gathered the team for a surprise announcement. The boardroom was packed. Executives sat beside janitors. Assistants beside directors. No titles, just people. Carter stood in front of the group. You all saw what Darnell did. But what you didn't see were the hundreds of messages we've received since, from employees across the country. People saying, I've been waiting for someone to believe in me too. He paused. So we're launching a new internal program. We're calling it Voices from the Ground Up. Murmurs spread through the room. He smiled. We'll be offering mentorship, training, and direct pathways to leadership for all employees, no matter their role. Because genius doesn't only wear suits. Applause broke out. Darnell, standing in the back, was stunned. He hadn't asked for this. But somehow he had inspired it. Later that day, as Darnell returned to his office, he heard someone call his name. Mr. Thomas? He turned. A young woman stood in the hallway, nervously twisting a lanyard around her finger. She was maybe 24. Tight curly hair, wide brown eyes, and a red maintenance shirt with a faded name tag that read, Camille. Can I talk to you? She asked. He nodded and motioned her in. They sat in silence for a moment before she spoke. I'm on night shift. I clean floors like you did. Darnell smiled. Nothing wrong with that. She nodded, swallowing hard. But I'm also a coder. Darnell blinked. A coder? She nodded quickly. I taught myself. Python, JavaScript, HTML, mostly from free online stuff. I build apps in my spare time. I just never told anyone. Why not? She looked down. Because no one ever asked. Darnell leaned back. I'm asking now. Over the next few weeks, Camille worked closely with Darnell and the IT department. At first, they doubted her. One developer asked, "Are you sure she didn't copy this code?" But then she fixed a back-end security bug the team had spent 3 weeks trying to solve. In 15 minutes. No one questioned her after that. Camille became the second janitor in the company's history to be promoted to a tech team. And she wasn't the last. The ripple continued. A cafeteria worker named Jose, who'd been sketching packaging ideas on napkins, now leading a product design brainstorm. An older mailroom clerk named Ms. Edna, who had a degree in finance from a country most executives couldn't pronounce. She was now mentoring younger staff on budgeting and savings. And one by one, the invisible became visible. All because one man said, "Excuse me, I speak Mandarin." One afternoon, as Darnell walked into the lobby, he spotted something new on the wall. A mural. Not painted, but made of photographs. Dozens of faces. Smiling. Proud. Strong. At the center, in bold letters, "We rise together." And underneath, in smaller script, "A company is only as powerful as the people it refuses to overlook." That evening, Darnell met Carter on the rooftop terrace. They looked out at the skyline. "You did something powerful here, Darnell," Carter said. "We did," he corrected. But Carter shook his head. "I just opened the door. You kicked it down." They both laughed. Then Carter added, "We've been approached by 3 other major firms asking how we built this culture shift. They want to learn from us." Darnell's eyes lit up. "Let's teach them." As the sun dipped below the skyline, a breeze rolled in. Cool. Calm. Alive with change. Darnell took a deep breath. This wasn't the end of his story. It was just the beginning of everyone else's. The legacy. As years pass, Darnell faces a choice that could define his future and impact thousands more. But to take that leap, he must return to the place it all began, the janitor's closet. Ever felt like your potential was invisible to others? This story isn't just fiction. It's a reminder that you are seen, you are valuable, and your voice matters. Drop Chapter 10. If you're ready to witness the moment Darnell returns to where it all started and chooses what comes next. The building was quiet. Not the silence of night, but the silence of endings. Darnell stood outside the same janitor's closet where it all began. Same brown door. Same scratched handle. 12 years ago, he used to lean on this mop, wiping the same floors everyone else walked over. People who barely knew he existed. Now, the company had just named a new building wing after him. The Darnell Thomas Innovation Hub. Inside the closet, it still smelled like bleach and old memories. But there, tucked in the corner, was his first notebook. He had hidden it behind a loose ceiling tile long ago. He pulled it out, dusted it off, and flipped through it. Pages filled with Mandarin phrases, business terms, dreams written in pencil, faint but fierce. On the last page, a line he barely remembered writing stared back at him. "Someday, I'll walk into a room and speak before anyone asks who I am." Darnell smiled. He had lived those words. The board had offered him a seat as senior vice president. It came with a 7-figure salary, a team of assistants, and stock options that could buy half a city. But lately, the suits didn't feel like his purpose anymore. He needed to do more than sit in rooms of power. He needed to build new ones. A week later, the company hosted a gala. Glass chandeliers. Polished speeches. Champagne that cost more than Darnell's first car. When it was his turn to speak, the crowd went silent. Darnell stood behind the podium and looked out. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out that old, tattered notebook. He held it up. "This," he said, "is where I wrote my future." The room leaned in. I wasn't waiting for a title or a handout. I was preparing for the moment when the world would finally look my way. He paused. Too many of us have dreams like this, hidden in closets, buried in fear, waiting for permission. He looked directly into the camera broadcasting live. "So I'm leaving this position to launch something new." Gasps. Then silence again. "I'm starting an academy for overlooked talent in forgotten corners. Janitors. Refugees. Ex-cons, dropouts. People with genius in their bones, but no one to listen. We're going to train them, believe in them, and then watch them rise. That fall, the Ground Up Academy opened its doors in a small urban warehouse Darnell bought with his own money. It had no crystal chandeliers, just second-hand desks, old computers, and one rule written above the entrance. Your past doesn't define you, but your belief will. Within months, students from all over the country applied. One girl from Detroit who'd taught herself animation on her mom's broken phone. A former inmate who could break down complex math like poetry. A deaf young man who built an AI to help others hear. They all came, not just to learn, but to be seen. 10 years later, a journalist asked Darnell during an interview, "Do you ever miss the corporate world?" He laughed gently. "I don't miss the boardrooms. I miss the broom closets." She frowned. "Why?" "Because that's where I found my real self. Where I learned that even when the world calls you just a janitor, your mind can still be $1 million idea." Darnell's name would go on to appear in Time magazine, in classrooms, in books about leadership and emotional intelligence. But to the people who mattered most, he wasn't a CEO. He was hope with a name. One morning, as Darnell walked through the academy halls, a young boy ran up to him. "Mr. Darnell, I won first place at the tech fair. They said my project could go national." Darnell knelt eye level. "That's amazing, Micah." The boy grinned. "I want to be like you one day." Darnell's eyes softened. "No," he said. "Be better. Be louder. Be braver. The world's waiting for your voice now. Sometimes your purpose isn't just to climb the ladder. It's to go back down and bring others up. If you've ever felt invisible, overlooked, or underestimated, this story is for you. Your story matters. Your dreams matter. Drop a comment with "I believe" if you're ready to rise, no matter where you started. Share this story with someone who needs to hear. It's never too late to be seen. Your voice is your power. Use it.